consent to set aside the pending amendment and call up amendment number 4123.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object. I'd like to explain my registering my right to make a point before I object. This amendment is inconsistent with current federal law and would allow states the right to break existing law. If there is an attempt to legalize across the country, we should have that debate and let the Congress decide the issue instead of creating a backdoor to legalization. Furthermore, the amendment would allow financial institutions to bank marijuana distributors. This is inappropriate to consider in the context of a criminal justice reform bill. Criminal justice is not a vehicle through which we create reform for banks to create more business. So the senator from Colorado is very much an advocate for the people in his state. I understand that. I respect his position. He works hard on this, and he may be ahead of the time when there will be a real debate on this, and maybe there will be, at that point, an opportunity to consider his approach as something lesser than the legalization of marijuana generally. So because of those reasons, I will object to what the senator from Colorado is trying to accomplish.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the senator from Iowa, Chairman Grassley. After much debate, disagreement, and compromise, the Senate this week is going to be taking up a bill that he's worked very hard to see through to this day, a criminal justice reform package. The package today that's on the floor that we're debating, talking about, amending, shows the American people that bipartisanship remains alive in the U.S. Senate. Leaders on both sides of the aisle, as well as the White House, should be commended for their admirable and persistent cooperation and determination on this legislation. I believe the package's goals are noble. It's right to help those who have paid their debt to re-enter society with the best possible chance to be productive contributors. It's right to take steps to ensure that sentences are fair and appropriately tailored to the defendant. And it's right to calibrate the way we treat those in custody based on the risk that they pose to society. But being from Colorado, it's hard to think about federal criminal justice reform without thinking about the biggest problem the federal criminal law creates for Colorado: the refusal to respect the will of Coloradans when it comes to their decision on marijuana. That's exactly what I am trying to do, is to create a debate so that we can address the conflict between state and federal law. Everyday Coloradans of good faith follow Colorado law to a T, yet they are still criminals in the eyes of the federal government. Cancer patients using medical marijuana to control their pain, and veterans who are using marijuana to alleviate post-traumatic stress they suffer because they served their country. Federal law says they are criminals, even though they are perfectly legal within their right under state law. That's the attempt we are making today, is to fix the inconsistency between federal and state law, to begin the debate. Because the people don't think that they're criminals when they follow the law in Colorado. So we should change federal law. This disconnect doesn't just affect the industry's patrons or even its growers and retailers for that matter. It also makes criminals of those outside of the industry. And as we were talking about criminal sentencing reform, we should be thinking about a plumber, electricians, bankers, landlords, real estate service providers, employment and advertisement agencies, insurance companies, HR services, and all of the everyday businesses that interact with the marijuana industry like they do any other part of our economy are affected by federal law too. That's because when they take money from a marijuana business, federal law considers them money launderers, putting them at risk for both criminal liability and civil asset forfeiture. That means the mother who moved to Colorado to treat their child who has epileptic conditions, severe epilepsy, thousands of seizures a month, to move to Colorado to treat them with the CBD oil that you can derive from the work that we are doing on marijuana that reduces those seizures from 1,000 a month to a few, 6, 7, 8, or a dozen a month, are illegal under the eyes of the federal government, putting them at risk for criminal liability, and civil asset forfeiture. The disconnect forces Colorado's $1.5 billion market back into the pseudo shadows, where business is in hard-to-track cash. $1.5 billion in cash, inviting dangerous robberies, hindering law enforcement, efforts to ensure that legal marijuana sales benefit legitimate businesses rather than illicit cartels. This is an effort to bring that $1.5 billion in Colorado alone out of those shadows. It also means that researchers can't test marijuana for medical efficacy to help better understand impairment because those researchers fear the loss of federal funding. All of this flies in the face of what the Colorado people have chosen to do for themselves. Indeed, it flies in the face of the 33 states that have now legalized some form of marijuana, including 10 that allow regulated adult use. And this year alone, just this year, Oklahoma, Missouri, Utah have passed laws establishing medical marijuana programs, and Michigan and Vermont have passed laws permitting regulated adult use. And Wisconsin voters in 16 counties overwhelmingly passed advisory referenda supporting legalization. Here's the chart. Look at this chart. Green on this chart represents the states that have legalized some form of marijuana. Whether it's recreational, whether it's medical, whether it's CBDs, some kind of a hemp product, cannabis. Look at the green on this map. Over 95% of the population in this country live in a state that have made legalization happen in some way, shape, or form. Almost every state, let's go to the list of the states. Almost every state. Here are the states allowing some form of marijuana: Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida. It goes on and on. It's easier to say the 3 states that have not allowed it: Idaho, Nebraska, and South Dakota. The only 3 states that have not. Recent polling from Quinnipiac shows more than 60% of the American people support legalized marijuana and 93% support medical marijuana. 93%. Support medical marijuana. The American people have made up their minds. This is happening. Let's be clear. This isn't just happening in blue states like California or Massachusetts or purple states like Colorado. It's happening in bold, deep red states like Utah, Oklahoma, and West Virginia. And it's happening in swing states like Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Missouri. The bedrock principle of our government expressed in the Declaration of Independence is that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. As the federal government continues to ignore the will of the people lose respect for the law. The Congress must respond because one way or the other, the people of this country are having their say. That is why Senator Warren and I are offering the STATES Act as an amendment to this criminal justice package before the Senate. The act is a simple, straightforward plan. Within certain basic federal guardrails, conduct in compliance with state marijuana law will not violate the Controlled Substances Act. This legislation is the embodiment of federalism our founders envisioned. It allows each state to move, if at all, at their own pace. It lets states like Colorado be the laboratory of democracy that American people have come to expect. But most importantly, it lets Colorado be Colorado, South Carolina be South Carolina, and Florida be Florida, and they all will have federal prosecutors backing up whatever decision they make with respect to this decision. The people of Colorado have made their decision already. I did not vote for legalization in 2012. I did not support legalization, but I respect my state's decision. Its people know what is right for the Colorado. Its people know what is right for the state, for Colorado. That decision that Colorado makes may not be right for the people of South Carolina or Florida. But their decision should be respected and supported by the federal government, just like the decisions in every other state. I'm all for helping those that have paid their debt to society, but there are many for whom there should be no debt. That is why the STATES Act should be included in federal criminal justice reform. Let's close with this map. If I could see it one more time. Over 95% of the population of the United States lives in a state where they have legalized some form of marijuana. Every state in green is a state that has legalized some form of marijuana. By the year 2022, this industry will be over $20 billion, all of which can't be in the banking system, because it's against federal law. And what happens when you force a $20 billion all-cash economy? I guess that's what we ought to be dealing with here today. This isn't just about banking. That's a side effect of the States Act. The States Act recognizes that federalist principle, that a state can decide this issue for itself. This bill, this amendment, at this time recognizes that you shouldn't go to federal prison for following state law. That, in its essence, is sentencing reform. If we had a chance to vote on this amendment today, the amendment would be germane. It would be a 50-vote threshold, simple majority, up or down. And I know that this bill, this amendment, has the support from this body on both sides of the aisle to fix this conflict and allow the states to make their own decisions without the heavy hand of Washington telling them what to do. Mr. President, I yield my time and will not give up this fight.